childcare today. No, he's doing well. We had x-rays, nothing broken, just a sprain, so he's just trying to stay off it. And unfortunately, his office is downstairs and everything else in the house is upstairs, so there's some challenges. But thank you for asking.
Good to hear. Give him our best.
Thank you.
We are going to be live today, streaming. Have we started?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councillor Carlson.
did I hear there was live streaming so I can see you all?
We will be live streaming for the first time today. We're just trying to get it all connected.
Excellent. I will log in. Thank you.
Yes. So we could just live stream it and then not record it. No, I was kidding. It's not fun then, no. All right, let's get ourselves started. It is just after 1. You need how many more minutes?
It is, we're streaming just fine on YouTube. It's having difficulty connecting to the website. I'm not sure what's happening, but.
Okay. So we'll give you a few more minutes just to get that figured out. So what did they say on SNL? Talk among yourselves?
Madam Chair, Jeff again. Sorry. Is there I don't have the YouTube site, so I could watch that instead if it's not up on the website.
Does anybody know the YouTube site? Is it just City of Lethbridge YouTube? Yeah, if you look City of Lethbridge YouTube.
Perfect. Thank you.
On Thursday and Friday and Saturday, 46 degrees.
Oh.
I've been there once and it was 47 once. It was so hot.
No, down in Arizona.
46 this weekend.
No, it was September when we were in Vegas one year. I'm not going back in September again.
So it's at least it's not a humid heat, it's a dry heat. It's like being a blow dryer.
It's still heat.
Oh, it's so hot.
Councillor Kaufman, I was joking yesterday that we could follow the Utilities 101 and save money by shutting off the air conditioning. No. We'll find money for that?
We're just waiting for a word from our IT friends,
Okay.
but we aren't streaming to the Lethbridge.ca site, we're streaming on the city's YouTube channel, 100%. So what that means is it's actually capturing, and I can put a recording up later, but it's not necessarily live
So
streaming.
we can go?
Your
Okay.
call.
All right. We're okay recording and putting it up later, right? Yeah. I think I only know one person who thought they might watch us today, so I think we'll be okay.
And do you mean me?
Yeah. Oh, besides Councillor Carlson, yes. but he's got the YouTube channel. So let us get going, because I know people have other commitments as well. So we have the agenda. I'm going to start with the acknowledgement statement, and we'll go from there. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathering on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. So we had an agenda that was circulated. Are we okay going with the agenda and in the order of the agenda? Is there any?
If I can just ask, Madam Chairman, if the city manager has other commitments?
No, I'm fine, thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Fine with the agenda in the order, so we'll adopt the agenda by consensus. The minutes were also circulated from the June 30th meeting. Is there any errors and omissions that anyone noted, or can we adopt or approve the minutes as by consensus as well? I'm going to take a no as a yes, or no comment as a yes. So we jump into our governance review work plan. We're starting again on recommendation 1, Municipal Sustainability Committee model. We have with that the presentation from June 30th, just so we remind ourselves which model we chose. And we have the excerpt from the OEG meetings of that time as well, which reminds us that we are working on those questions, the considerations, public input, delegation, etc. So Ms. Hilford, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Croson. Yes, at the last OEG meeting, committee had chosen the Municipal Sustainability Model, and you'll see that up there as the last model. And that consists of social, environment, economic, cultural, and governance committees. So we were to come back at this meeting and kind of flesh out the details with regards to the 6 questions that were asked, and David's going to get those up right away, and look at some feedback if you want to provide, and then we can go away and write up some mandates and some terms of reference for each one. But the 6 questions were public input, delegation of authority to the committees from council, mandates, reporting of which BCCs to which SPCs, improved transparency and committee meetings, and I'll detail that out in a minute, and non-council participation at SPCs, if you want that as well. One I missed up there, which should be up there, is composition. And what I mean by that mainly is whether it's going to be all council, council and administration, council and organizational reps. I imagine it'll be mostly council, but how many councillors you want on each committee. So if we could maybe think about that as a number 7. So I don't know if you want to go in order. The first one was public input, and whether you want to have public input at these SPCs. What I mean by that would be written submissions from the public on agenda items, or speaking, the public being able to speak at committee meetings, or both. You can have both, or you can have neither. Or some committees can have some or a combination of others. It's wide open right now as to what model you want. Generally, what I've seen at SPCs is public is able to speak at the ones that do have public services. But the ones that have internal services, generally the public does not speak or provide written submission.
Councillor Kaufman wants to speak.
Thank you. Actually, just a question. We have a public participation bylaw. Is there anything in that bylaw that would tie into public participation in a different structure?
I don't know that one well. David's shaking his head. He knows it pretty well.
Is it just a policy? I thought we had, do we have a bylaw as well? Or
So council was directed through the Municipal Government Act. There was an amendment made a couple of years ago which said you had to pass a public participation policy.
Okay.
And that was passed last June. And so really it just talks about the different ways that you would engage with the public. So it doesn't specifically state anything dealing with the committees.
There's nothing prescribed in that.
Correct.
So
It just says these are the kinds of things how we're going to engage, really is what it says. And I know that Ms. Mitten was going to, part of her presentation coming back to, was she's just going to go over that policy with you and see if it still meets your needs and whatever, because it's been in practice for about a year.
is there anything in that policy then that would inform how we approach or what we approach, or is outlined in the policy stating this is how you should approach certain things?
Well, yes, it just says how you're going to engage with them. It doesn't say specifically about committees. So it talks about whether you have open houses, whether you're going to use social media, those kinds of things.
But form may inform function.
Sorry?
Structure may inform function. So if we've got a structure set up in standing policy committees that, as you say, outward-facing versus inward-facing, then how do we communicate with public? Outward-facing is going to have to tie into the policy, or ought to at least tie into the policy. That was just a question. If it's a policy and not a bylaw, I thought it was a bylaw, but excellent, thank you.
So let's start with the first question, need for public input. I mean, right there, it'll determine right which way we're going. Do we think the public should have input at committee levels? Just that basic question.
Carlson here.
Go ahead.
Perhaps because I think some may deserve public input or require or be better served with public input. So if we're only looking at the municipal sustainability model, is that what we're looking at?
That's the one that was chosen to look at, yes.
Then perhaps if we went through each of those five and talked about the pros and cons of public input on each of those, would that make sense?
Okay, we'll start with that form. So social is first.
Yeah, so, and it might be helpful to talk about mandates, what you're looking for in mandates before we actually go to this question. So we might want to come back to this question after we talk about what is it that would be brought to this committee, what kind of reporting. So,
Okay.
Sorry to
Nope, that's okay, we can jump
complicate
around.
things.
So define for us, so everybody has the same definition, what is the social one?
Are we going to do mandate as we go first and then, like, are we doing this sort of code?
Holistically, yes. So looking at the social, what do we think as social? We picked this as our program. So what is social? What would be under that? CSD department?
Housing, community services, emergency support, financial support, things to community.
But would that also be rec and culture? Would that
Well, I
also
would-
be the museum? Would that also be?
No. So when I'm talking supports, I'm meaning housing supports, immediate need. You have some sort of crisis that, the municipality has to provide funding for, things of that nature. Soft services, compassionate services, however you want to identify that. So are we looking to contextualize it into current business units, or are we looking to contextualize?
I think that would help, because we're later on going to be looking at what committees already exist would be reporting, so that would help if we knew, who would be reporting up to it.
So if we have a binder with all the business units, would that help?
Help you on the web. Are you looking for the business units or the
Yeah,
boards,
just looking
committees, and
for
commissions?
business units. Because in theory, we've got to encapsulate all of the business units, correct?
Well, unless somebody wants to be independent.
Community social services, community services support, community social development, family and community support services. Oh, sorry, so this is on the operating budget. This is the budget summary index, page 5.
I'm not.
Basically CSD, what SHIA and CSD community had before would sort of be the ones that would be under this.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, and I appreciate where we're heading with this. I'm also wondering, because we've looked at the 5 standing committees, the social and cultural ones may be intertwined. I'm just not, or I guess I'm thinking some business units, some committees, et cetera, would have standing under a couple of these buckets.
Is that something we want, or is that something that is suggested against under, have you seen, City Clerk? Are there more than one standing policy committee that a committee would report to?
Generally, no, but if there's a topic and it does touch multiple committees, it would go to multiple committees. But generally, no, it would just go through one, and that would be defined in your mandate.
Well, generally, everyone should have a home, but they might be invited to a different one.
Right.
And that begs a further question. Do we continue to have the social and cultural, pardon me, buckets split or standing committees split? Or is there any wisdom in having the social cultural bucket, which may make our life a bit easier?
And they can be combined,
Yeah.
however you like.
Let's keep that in our back pocket right now. Let's work with them separately and then see, because we might find that we made one way too big by the time we're done.
Perfect. Thank you.
And that's probably going to happen. There'll be some committees that are, you know,
More work than
heavier,
others.
more work, and some that are lighter, and then you'll see you might want to combine a couple.
So let's get back to the mandate of social. What are we thinking goes under it?
I agree with Jeff. It's the people services, the necessities, the things that people need. And you're still looking at that, sorry, I shall let you.
I can't
I'm sorry,
hear
I
Ryan,
just
sorry.
realized, I was just saying, I agree with Jeff in regards to it's the real people need things, not the people wants, the people need things, items. And Jeff, are you just going through the binder of the business units to see which ones would be applicable?
Yeah, and again, it's page 5 in the operating budget. It's the operating budget summary. So you know, theoretically, community services would fall under the social. But then it depends on how you're looking at other departments, because to Councillor Carlson's point, some of these could actually be popped into two, depending on how you contextualize them. But under social, for the purpose of the conversation here, I'd suggest that everything that falls under community services would be the social. And maybe that's how we have to recontextualize it. It's not social, it's community services.
Right.
But-
We haven't finalized names.
Yeah, but does that include infrastructure then? Does that include property services? So taxation, assessment, building safety, planning and development.
We have a lot of questions as we go through, probably expected at this point.
So community services includes, do you want me to read
Sure.
it? all?
I'm going, go ahead.
Community services support, community social development, family and community support services, regulatory services, NMAC Center, facility services, fire and emergency services, public safety communications center, rec and culture, aquatics, arenas, Fritz Sick Memorial Center, Yates Memorial Center, Helen Schuler Nature Center, cemetery services, Japanese gardens, Lethbridge Transit, accessible transportation, and school bus. So some of those would need to be pulled out. Probably rec and culture would fall under culture, or rec and
Max and a
culture,
few things.
I would assume.
That give you some guidance?
Yep,
Okay.
that's all we're looking for, some high-level guidance, and then we'll draft some more up in detail and bring it to the next meeting. But yeah, any feedback you want to give, we appreciate.
Under the social then, we have sort of the group that's there. So the mandate would be any of the committees that have social issues would be reporting to this one, which we've canceled quite a few of those right now. It would be the ones that are newly developing. So now that you have a sense of idea, we're looking at delegation of authority there. We're looking on non-member council participation, public input. Now that we sort of have a sense of what the social committee is, what are you thinking? Can this be one that doesn't have public input, being what it is?
Are we looking long-term or immediate term? Because
Both, I think.
I would respectfully suggest that at least for the first couple of years, it be just council, because it's easier to look at it just as council with, you know, soliciting input, public input. It'll be easier to go from council to expand to community than to start with council and community.
I'm not talking about who's going to be on the committee. I'm talking about, do we want people to even be able to come and talk to the committee?
Well, that's what I'm kind of saying as well, is just council only. It may be easier, as I'm sitting here just talking, it may be easier for each of the buckets to determine for sure whether or not they are looking for the input. Like we have to kind of do mandate first. Theoretically, in this one, intuitively, I would say yes, but I don't know, it's a chicken and egg, cart and horse thing in my mind. I'm getting a perplexed look from you.
No, I know where you're going, because you're thinking it'll be easier to organize from within if you are working as a small group and you've got it organized. But long-term, there has to be public input.
So are we in agreement that it's going to be made up of just council members? Are we in agreement there?
Public input can also be, there can be non-committee.
How about the committee setup?
We could have community members on committees too. That's another way public
We
input.
haven't finalized that at all yet.
No.
Okay.
No, my thought on it is that it should be in the first year or two just be council, to get used to the structure, to understand what it is that you need, and then if you need to broaden it or want to broaden it to include community, you can create the parameters around that because you've seen it working. My fear would be that you create the structure and you set it up so that there's community input, and then suddenly you discover it's problematic or it's a challenge on the governance side of the committee. Setting it up as council first would provide council the opportunity to get used to the system or structure and then expand it out to community, would be my recommendation. It's more of a soft rollout. The community then can see how it's working, and the committee may discover very quickly that no, public input is absolutely mandatory, and they can make the shift earlier. It just would be easier from, I think, the governance perspective to start with council and roll out to public, as opposed to start with council and public and then discover you've missed groups or you've missed some sort of structural component that is actually going to better inform the committee. That's just my
I could see that as long as there's a time guide, that you're only going to have 6 months to get yourselves organized, because it would be so easy just to keep them internal.
And is there a problem with that? It's quasi-rhetorical.
I think the promise with SPCs is it does give a better chance for the public to be participating. I think that you've got to have that as a goal to move towards.
What does participation look like?
That's what we're trying to decide.
Is it come and present? Like, if you, again, thinking about this, the issue specific is much more, in my mind, a better approach than trying to create the blanket that, yes, we want public input. SPC should always want public input. But then does it become issue specific, or is it input on everything?
What have you seen at different ones?
For SPCs that do have public input, the public can come and speak on any item of that respective committee. So
So there's just an agenda item that is public input for
where they
most part.
provide written submissions, or both.
It's issue-driven, right? It's based.
Issue-driven, yes, but any item on that agenda. Where it's an internal committee, like a priorities and governance, there hasn't been public participation.
There's the two different things. Do you put out a call going, on this issue, we want to know what you think? Or do you have it set in the agenda where it's like, anything that's going to be discussed, you are welcome to talk about? So, right, those are sort of the two. You could start with, initially for your first year, only if we call and ask, and then it will be added into the agenda after a year.
Say the more input, the better.
I'm very much a start as you want to go on, but I do understand the need to get it set. Because if it doesn't work, then there's a really good chance to just revert to our present approach.
And that's where the challenge of the public input comes in, that you establish this and then we'll just assume that there's some major issue that appears in the community, and suddenly you've got a brand new SPC that's being inundated by a ton of emails and a lot of participation. There's not a true understanding of the structure of how things are going to interrelate. I think it's going to create challenges perhaps for staff as well in terms of the approval structure. You know, the 4 members of the SPC may just decide, well, let's just kick it to council, which is always a prerogative, but it might be too early or too quick. So creating, I think, I always think it's easier to start tighter and go loose than it is to say we're open for everything and then start cutting people back. I mean, that's where the public, I think, will feel like, well, the SPCs are just created to give council more power, whereas SPCs are created to give the public more input, more opportunity.
We added number 7, composition. I think we need to add number 8, implementation. So we know where we want to head on some things, but we need to figure out how to get there. Because you're right, if it doesn't roll out the way we wish, there is a real tendency just to go back to what we have now.
And if I can add, like, council is getting a lot of public input directly, not coming through, clerk's office and the agenda, but you are getting it in different forms. This would just be a more structured model that the public would have, probably a portal on the web for whatever item, and it would come through the agenda, and it would be publicly available, and all councils would get it at the same time, rather than you getting emails or phone calls.
Similar to what we see with
For
MPC
instance,
and different
the
things like that.
conversion therapy bylaw, there was public input coming from everywhere, every which way, and there wasn't timelines or deadlines or anything, so.
I think, again, it'll be dependent on the mandate of the committee, need for public committee input for outward-facing ones, but planned in such a way that the committee has a chance to get its feet under itself before it moves forward. Now, what about delegation?
Question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm seeing this as two different conversations, and maybe I've missed something. I think the first question is public participation on the committee. Is that one of the questions that we were mulling?
Public input can go anywhere from public participation on a committee to written submissions and presentations to nothing at all. Like there's the
It's the
spectrum.
makeup of the committee, I think he's saying is.
No, that's what I mean, on the committee.
Right, and I guess I'm saying my gut feeling at the moment sort of leans to, I think, what maybe Councillor Kaufman was saying, that in the beginning, I think the membership should be limited to council. Is that what I was hearing?
Yeah, yes, that would be my starting point or my recommendation.
I think that's a fairly good recommendation, and I would support that. But for public participation in ability to contact or submit information, I'd appreciate that, because I think, as Bonnie was saying, right now we're getting scattered communication on all things at all times, and if they were funneled to the appropriate, if the public engagement or public input, I guess I'll call it, was funneled to the appropriate committee, that would be helpful. So I don't know if that makes sense to people, but I think there should be the ability for public to make submissions or make comments, and that information should be funneled to the proper standing committee.
Are you thinking right at as soon as it gets going, or does it take a while for the committee to get going and then open that portal?
Personally, I think it could be done immediately. I think it would just help with right now it's sort of scattered. Certain councillors get certain information, some that have no clue what it's about. But if those communications from the public were funneled to the appropriate committee, that would just be very helpful and make more sense to me.
Okay, so you've got the entire breadth there. So
I think this would also help the public as well. They would feel like they've been heard. They know that their communication's going to the appropriate place, and they've had their time to communicate with council, whether that's written or verbal or however you decide. And there's a structure there, and they'll get used to the structure.
all right, now we get to bring into the mixed delegation of authority. How much authority do we want to give these committees, starting with the social one that we're on? What level of decision-making can they have? Go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it would be, I guess, in my mind, it's somewhat issue dependent. Perhaps, say, if say under the social, if FCSS is in that bucket, the council may decide to say that committee makes the decision that's ratified by council, or they could say, you guys make the complete decision. So I guess it would be issue dependent in my mind.
And sorry to interrupt. And I have seen that. It would be issue dependent. That would be in your mandate, saying what specific issue that committee decides on and what specific issue council decides on.
So you could take the mandate and just divide it up into two.
Yeah, so again, that goes back to getting a solid mandate and then going back and deciding your delegation of authority.
Can another way be done based on amount of money, level of money?
Yep, thresholds of money,
So
for
you
sure.
could have two different ones, right?
I might have Brian chime in here. I believe that budget decisions have to be by council, but I think there's some thresholds, Brian?
Can't delegate the ability to pass budgets.
Pass budgets, but to spend money,
Spend money.
you
If
can.
it's been, your committee has this much money to spend.
Well, depending on how the budget is set up, your budget process would have to budget amounts to that committee then. Because generally speaking, your budget is a spending authorization to administration, except for council's budget or those kinds of things. So you might have to think about structuring your budget differently.
I agree that council has to pass budgets, but the spending can be a decision of council with regards to thresholds.
So those are two different ways we could do
Okay,
it.
but question then, on this committee, we have an annual budget. When we decide to spend it, do we go back to council to get authorization, or do we just spend it, as long as we're within the envelope?
I think what we're talking about here with the SPCs is that, let's say you had an infrastructure SPC, their budget is 200 million. And it's about council approving that as part of the whole budget envelope, and they can spend that 200 million as they see fit. If they want 201 million, they have to come back to council to ask for an increase in their budget.
They could say if you're spending above 50,000 on an item, that would have, oops, I'm so sorry, you have to go to council. Those are things to consider.
So currently with your committees which do have budgets or did have budgets, such as the Environment and Open and Effective Government, it depended on the type of decision. So it wasn't just about the money, it was about the type of decision. So there were some things which had low, didn't cost very much, but you still went to council to get approval to proceed with whatever action it was.
So for example, when we did citizen assembly,
So that one was assigned to, was within your budget, but you went to council for the approval because of the type of decision it was.
Excuse me.
So can both be put into a mandate so that, you know, budget and issue? So I think that's sort of the consensus that, I don't know what the levels will be, but they have to have some delegated authority or they're useless.
That's correct. If you're not going to delegate any authority from council, there's no point in having these SPCs at all.
exactly, because every time, the special public body, we're being entrusted. That's the key word. We're being entrusted to do the work and make the decisions.
Correct.
Everything has to go back. This committee, all of it.
So,
But I have seen like a combination that half the decisions would be made by committee and half would go up to council. And they would just go on the consent agenda, the reports with, you know, a small little note from clerk saying this was the vote, and just a little bit about what happened at committee. And if another member that didn't participate on that committee wanted to pull the report and discuss it and debate it, they could. But a
That
lot of
gets
the
down to-
reports from SPCs do go up to council either for information or for decisions. So don't think that council doesn't see anything or know anything. And clerks is in the process of having all of council and SMT get copied on all the committee minutes and all the agendas that they don't attend, so that there's a lot of information sharing across the corporation that was missing.
But might as well jump into non-member council participation.
can I just ask a question? Is there a mechanism for council to request something be moved from an SPC and brought to council?
I've seen that for sure, yeah.
Like that mechanism put in.
I'd like that mechanism put in, yeah.
Or, you know, a decision that was to be made at committee, they decide they want to bump it to council.
If a committee wants to decide to bump, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's also about at least the majority of council being able to take an issue that's at a committee and put it in front of the entire body as well, to pull up as much as it is to push up.
The model, however you want to make it,
Excellent.
putting the rules into the procedure bylaw.
So that does tie to non-member council participation, right? Because if they have that mechanism, will they wish to come to the council meeting or the committee meeting or not? So right now, under our present rules, any member of council can come to a meeting, but they are non-voting if they come. So there are options that if they come, they can vote. That way you don't have to redebate things at council. Or we can have them as visitors, non-voting. What do you think with your colleagues at a committee meeting?
As well, debating, can they
As well,
debate?
yeah. So can they attend, can they vote, can they debate, what's their participation, and will it depend for different committees?
Carlson here.
Go ahead.
I kind of like the idea. I'm not sure exactly how it would work, but I'm intrigued by the idea of having the ability for non-standing members of council to sit at the committee and debate, but not vote. I'm not sure how that works. If you have 5 or 6 or 9 councillors debating an issue around the table, I guess it has to be laid out very succinctly of how that's done. But I think it would help strengthen the discussion at the committee level and help make for better decision making that all of council would be able to support. Even if they can't vote, they've had some input if they desire.
So if I could just add to that, from my experience, I've seen some councillors are very passionate about some issues, so of course they want to attend those meetings with those issues and be able to speak and debate on those. If they're not able to vote, then they're going to pull it from the council agenda and you're going to rehash it again. So that's just something to consider. So you might want to just have them be able to vote. I mean, is there any harm in that? Something to think about.
So you're saying they can let them vote, but then you would almost be a council meeting again.
That's my thanks, Ryan. That's my concern. Is all of a sudden we've got a quorum of council making decisions outside of a council meeting.
That's why we leave a maximum to our committees, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least 4 people, because as soon as you get 5, you get a majority. So technically, that's what we try not to do.
But I imagine it's only on very specific issues. It probably doesn't happen very often because it'd be mostly routine stuff at committees, and it would just be on certain things that people would feel passionate about to come to. So how often would it happen, and would it be an issue if it happened once in a while?
It's going to be quite a change from what you have now. You have council attending all items at CIC. So I don't know what the composition would be. It would be 4 members of council per committee I'm hearing. Then the other 5, would they be pulling everything? Because if they're going to be pulling it at council.
Right, then you're just redoing the work and the SBCs have no value.
But if it's only for some issues, then that might be fine. I mean, it might be a trial. We might have to try something for a year and then tweak it.
Written submission only.
Less than the public?
No, well, yeah, less than, because we have access constantly. So, you know, we're not equal to the public. That's just the reality. But, you know, participation be written.
So they can attend, but if they want to say something, they have to have it in writing, and they can't vote.
I don't agree that they should be voting. I think it's the committee. What happens if we do have an issue that for whatever reason can't get pulled from the committee, you can't meet that threshold, but you end up with 8 members of council in the room and you've got 4 speaking very vehemently in favor or opposed. I think it can set it up for some challenges. Obviously, we will know from agenda what items are coming up and why we're concerned or passionate about it, and we can express that to the members of the committee. Written submission is harder, I get that, but if you want to create an opportunity for council to participate but not do it not in a council meeting, then written submission is the way to address it.
The consensus I'm hearing is they can attend, they can speak or write, they can't vote. Would that be sort of where everybody's heading?
Yeah.
Agreed.
I would not want a council majority.
Brian, are you okay with that?
I don't want a council majority. That was my fear.
Okay,
Where
that can definitely be
everybody's-
done. Yep.
What else were we looking at under that one? Is that enough for the social? Sort of to get you going on that one?
Yeah, and we can figure out what BCCs would report into that, and we could come back with a model.
Now, I'm assuming environment and cultural would be similar, right? They'd both be outward-facing ones and very similar in how the structure would be. Would I be correct? Would you agree? That what we've said for social would probably apply to environment and cultural?
I agree.
Yeah, I would I could see in combining environment and cultural, and then in that fifth box, that would be infrastructure and safety.
That last part again?
I would combine environment and culture, and then in the fifth box, it would become free. Not that we're confined to the boxes, we can create whatever we want, but I think the one that's missing from that is infrastructure and safety.
Okay. So
if you want to deal
social,
with it,
environment,
social,
culture, one,
environment, culture.
infrastructure and safety, economic and governance. Is infrastructure and safety outward or inward facing? Does it have the same rules as social and cultural environment, or is it more economic and governance?
I see it as being outward facing.
So what we've said for social would apply to it? Councillor Carlson, would you agree with that?
I'm just a bit lost. Jeffrey, can you help me with, I can't see, I'm looking on my own page.
It's the
but I
type
don't
of
know that I.
SPC governance models, and he's just changing the municipal sustainability model.
Yes, and I need some rationale behind merging environment and culture.
You want to provide that, Councillor?
It was your idea, why am I?
No, it was your idea to combine environment and culture, was it
Wasn't?
not?
I said those three would be similar in how they'd be approached. I didn't say I was combining them.
Well, Councillor Carlson, you had suggested combining culture and social, hadn't you?
Yes.
Okay.
I see those as more of a tie-in than environment and culture.
Want to put environment in safety and
I go with infrastructure
Well,
more?
safety and infrastructure are the ones that should go together.
Yeah, but actually putting in, so to go back in the day to the mid-90s, it was transportation, utilities, and the environment. That was our TOE standing policy committee. And there is a natural synergy with them because a lot of infrastructure issues deal with environment. A lot of safety issues deal with infrastructure. I think safety does need a component somewhere. Tying it with infrastructure makes some sense, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But infrastructure and environment, I think, is a natural synergy.
I keep that as an outward-facing one, so basically the sort of the mandate we had for the others would, fit in.
Governance and economic. I think economic is the one that's on the cusp because we're always looking inward at the organization, but there are also outward demands as well.
So let's jump to governance though, because then it's a little bit easier. So governance, inward or outward facing?
I see it as inward.
With an awareness of the outward.
With an awareness of the outward. And I think that one is issue specific on what you bring the public in on.
And would that include finance in your mind?
Finance under economic.
Economic, it could be, yeah.
Councillor Carlson, did we stop you from saying something?
No, I'm just, I'm trying to wrap my brain around this. Do governance and economic have a tie?
Well, you can't govern if you don't have money.
Well, and that's why I'm
just no fun.
I'm just thinking those two, if we're trying to pair some, I don't know if we are, but governance and economic may be tied more closely together.
I see OEG becoming the governance part like that, and audit becoming more the economic part. That's how I've seen it when I've seen the model.
So you're thinking they need to be separate?
I think they are.
For clarity for everybody, and it is harder for Councillor Carlson, but we're not talking about combining boxes now. We're just talking about whether they're inward facing or outward facing. So it's just finding comparators in organization of the SPC. That's all. So we're not looking at combining boxes.
Right.
On this. Yeah.
I agree that governance is more inward facing.
So public input very specific to issues. So, because it'd be much more about how we run inside.
It would be just like OEG, just like you said. Yeah, the issues that come here.
And everything else, and how the non-members of council would participate, everything else similar? It's just the public participation that you see different? I'm assuming so, since nobody's answered.
Well, I think the public participation would be different, because sometimes the public participation is broad. Let's say, for example, we want to explore a ward system. Speaking hypothetically, of course.
He never brings things back.
You know, would you be looking for a different body of wisdom or expertise or input than you would on a procedure bylaw? You know,
Absolutely.
you might be looking for a parliamentarian to participate on that conversation, as opposed to public writ large or experts on you know, ward structure, things of that nature. So I see the governance one being very specific in who it's wanting to speak with. At the same time, you know, there's probably that broad rule: if you want to participate in an item, you know, you can submit it in writing or however you want to set that up. So the public, I think, is always has the ability, but I think governance is much more structured towards, this is the information we're seeking, so we need to go out and find it, as opposed to just who wants to talk about the procedure bylaw today.
It might be on our participation schedule, just might be a different category we're going for. We're looking for more information than for, yeah. So there will be public input, but very defined.
We're talking generally about the governance of the organization.
Anything else under that one? I think that one we sort of know. Economic, you're right. Economic goes both ways, because there's inward and outward facing parts. So public input here, how?
It may be issue specific, because I know from audit committee, we invited somebody to come and talk about investments when we were looking at the changes to the investment policy. We had Larry Alford, we invited Larry Alford to come and give a presentation, and talked about the way that it's structured and how it relates, how what we do relates to the industry. So there was an example where we actually sought out public.
And if I can add to that, I think invited guests from the committee would be different than the public, like anybody just coming to speak or submit. So I would see invited guests by the committee all through this model.
Challenge with economic, I think you'd have a packed gallery, which is always awesome, but I want to talk about my taxes. I want to talk about my utilities. And is the SPC the forum for that? Like, we really don't have a forum for that. You send me an email.
I want a complaint mechanism.
Yeah.
That SPC's time, if it's not controlled. So I think that's the issue we have, is how to make sure that it's going to be on topic, so that SPC is moving as they need to.
Haven't generally seen like finance committees open to the public. I've seen them open it up for budget debates.
For very specific issues.
But you could have like a lot of people coming all the time.
So let's set it more
to
like the
think about
governance model, with the potential for issue-specific open.
Yeah.
But, and I think what you would probably see is you'd see the first half of the meeting, and it's open to the public. The first half of the meeting is a conversation about X, Y, Z, whatever. And then the second half of the meeting is the public is here, and you can have that dialogue or that conversation. Yeah, so you just control the agenda in terms of setting things up.
Hard for the public when an SPC is split into, there's public on these items and not on these items in your mandate. You're going to get public submissions for everything, because they don't really understand that you can do that and you can't do that. Why can't I, right? So just, that's something to think about too. If you can keep it to a committee, better, but if you want to split your mandates with public input, we can do that too.
But again, for clarity, in my mind, there's something different between written and showing up to talk to,
Yep.
to a body that's going to listen to me, whether or not they can actually or will actually do anything, at least a body to listen to me. So if you want to submit on HR policy 17 and suggest something or talk about something, I don't see any issue with that.
Yep.
It's the when are you here and where does the public engagement become? Because I think ultimately under economic and finance, it comes down to taxes and utilities.
Got it. Thank you.
They're probably not going to put anything into our investment policy discussion.
I know a couple of people that would, actually.
Bonnie, do you have what you kind of looking for?
I do think I do have what I'm looking for. I'm going to look to Ryan and David and maybe City Manager Dalton if they want to ask any questions or add anything.
For our discussion, has the mandate sort of become clear as we've linked them to what we're thinking?
Participation, composition. Yes, and just for number 5, the improved transparency and access, that really wasn't a question, but it's what would we stream these meetings? And I would recommend we stream them and we record them.
That's the
That
plan.
clerks would provide legislative support, that there would be the same deadlines as in the procedure bylaw for council, that these meetings be added to the council calendar for clarity and for transparency as well.
And then all committees are responsible for sending up reports to council.
Absolutely, yeah. We would include that in procedure bylaw about reporting, yeah, yeah. I think I have everything. I'm going to look to everybody else if they have any questions that got missed. Ryan?
Big question for Brian, if I can. We would have to then affect change the city manager's bylaw for this as well, right? Because there are going to be some different reporting mechanisms. Were you working on a flow? The CAO bylaw would actually then have to change for this as well, would it not?
It's sort of a situation of pickup sticks where everything is touching everything else. And so I think the work that you're doing here is going to drive ultimately what we can do in those other forums. So I haven't really moved forward on that until some of the determinations here are made and ultimately accepted by council. So is that helpful?
Yeah. Is there a mechanism then, and it's kind of back to ultimate authority, is there a mechanism in SPCs for the CAO to go, okay, I've received an instruction, but my spidey sense is tingling on this one. I really do think it should go to council writ large. I recognize that you'll respect, the decision of the SPC, but there may be the need for the CAO to go, I think all council needs sober second thought or participation on this one.
I would think that the city manager would take any issue he deemed appropriate to an SPC. Is that what you mean? Sorry.
Yeah, again, it's if it's up to the SPC to propose or
I think
if the SPC is working towards something that has perhaps shifted, as we like to do here, X is in front of you and we end up with Y plus 2 other things. If the CAO is seeing the broader picture and there is some complication, but the SPC for whatever reason isn't dealing with it or is choosing not to, something that the CAO can say, I would just respectfully suggest that this goes to council writ large. I can't think of anything, but I'm just trying to think of situations that we could work ourselves into when you start delegating authority like that, because the SPCs will be providing instructions in theory to the CAO.
You're talking a report that we think administration, city manager should go directly to council and not to an SPC.
Perhaps, or something that's in an SPC that a decision is going to be made that has been delegated to the SPC, but some sort of, it's finding that governance operation balance.
I would think the city manager would have all that authority to direct reports however he sees fit.
No, I understand what you're saying too. I was going to ask Bonnie, have you, because this is the way they operated in Calgary, have you seen that situation arise, and would it be, because I think it could go either one of 2 ways. It could be sort of codified, or it could be just an expectation, a reasonable expectation that the city manager would make that point to the SPC. And like, did you see this occur in Calgary where an SPC was maybe in an area that maybe they weren't delegated the authority to deal with and it had to go to council? Did you see that?
Yeah, we've seen all kinds of things there, of course, that where it was at an SPC and then we're like, oh, I think it's got to go back to maybe a BCC, or also this other SPC needs to have input as well. So yeah, the city manager would request that committee, refer it to another committee or go to council. Like, yes, we've seen all kinds of things. It's all about getting the appropriate information required from the appropriate body, and you should have the ability to do that. I'm not sure I answered your question.
Yeah, I think that addresses it. Just When I'm thinking policy or structure, I always try to think of the well, what ifs, and I hope the what ifs never happen, but I think that's covered. Okay, thank you.
We'll probably find the what ifs, don't worry. So do we feel like 4.1 is covered in completion? Or is enough for today?
Yeah, enough for us to bring something back at the next meeting with mandates that you can take a good look at and see what you want to revise from there.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So 4.2, public inquiries, Ms. Hilford.
A couple months ago, prior to CM Dalton's being here, we had given you the report on public inquiries that go to council. So since then, I had many conversations with CM Dalton, and there's been some revisions to the process, and we kind of landed on the public inquiries that go to council. Can they maybe be first go to like the 311 portal? So we do have a 311 portal. We're just wondering if we could maybe add a council icon as well as a city clerk icon, and then they can get more information. They might get the information they're looking for, or if they have an operational request, it would go right to 311. Otherwise, it would go back to the process it does now. So you wouldn't see much change at all. You'd still be getting the inquiries that come in, but for the public would have a different venue to make their inquiries, and especially if it is an operational inquiry. So why have a 311 portal? Sorry?
Well, I want to define, can you define what a public inquiry is in the context of this conversation?
It's all the
Well,
emails that you get from the public asking questions.
Okay, so like, let's say, for example, I noticed the grass isn't being mowed. Boom.
Yeah.
That went to 311, they would probably say, they add like, well, we cut back on our staffing, and would they answer those questions, or is it like?
I'm not really sure, or they might funnel it to the appropriate person to answer.
Okay, so in the context of what we're talking about, when we say public inquiries, are these more in regards to governance questions, or what kind of questions are you talking about if we're going to have that icon?
Well, it's all the emails that you get currently. We're just going to add another methodology for the public to make their inquiries. Because if they're asking about their grass, they could probably ask 311 and get a really quick answer, rather than asking all of council, and then council's not knowing who responded, or did it go to the mayor, or who did it go to? Because I see that happening now. So just being able to kind of help the public out.
So it's just another format. They're not going to take away our emails or anything?
No. And you can also get reporting as well from 311. So why have it? So it would assist the public to have their operational inquiries responded to quickly. It would require registration of the public to use 311. So we would have some names and addresses, I think, some information. Provide the ability for reporting and tracking we talked about, and ensures that a historical repository is able to be referenced. Ensure separation of service requests versus council inquiries versus public record. And allow for consistent information being shared. Go to the next one. Oh dear, you went right to the end.
I did.
So we modeled it after.
That was a good presentation.
We modeled it after the city of Abbotsford. And if you right click on the city of Abbotsford, you'll go to their blue link. Just right click on it and then hit open. Okay, and you scroll down. And they had a little council portal, and the team thought it was kind of appropriate to what we were looking for. Scroll down. There it is. So they have different categories than we would have, but they have invitation for mayor and council to attend events, a request for a letter, a request for a certificate, book a school tour. That's what we have. Mayor and council. So when they click on that, it won't go to 311, but it'll go to the pages with your bios. An icon for agendas and meetings, so that would go to our on-base page, watching council, minutes, bylaws, reports. So that's what, and if you want to click on one, whichever one, I think there's more, and it says contact council, but if you just scroll down. So it's got all the bios. It was a quick scroll.
A side note, we did videos of us, kind of a little, I don't know if we all did those videos. Are those uploaded yet?
Did what? I'm sorry?
We had little interviews with each one of us. It was, I think Keaton.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
We can find
communication-
out.
Yeah, because they did those, like, I don't know if you all did one.
What, a year ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to, I noticed that they haven't been uploaded yet, so.
Okay, well, we'll check for sure, yeah. If you want to click on the connect with mayor and city council, so the top right. And scroll down. So it gives you more information. It says this is a media inquiry, service request, and it gives you links. And then down below it says contact council. So when they fill out this information, then it's going to go to all of council. So this is a model, and that's what Abbotsford uses. We could mock up a similar model or a model that works for us. Go back to the PowerPoint. So I'm sorry that this is so small, but this is kind of something that the team had mocked up. There would be a mayor and councillor, book a school tour, council meetings, city bylaws, contact your councillor, request for letter of support, et cetera, et cetera. So those are kind of the things we mocked up. That would be the icons for the 311 portal. And then one more slide. So also an auto response, this is the last slide, that we are thinking that should be on the 110 and the 120. That's the council email box and the mayor email box, and just to tell them that we got their inquiry, and if it's regarding a service rents request, to contact 311, and et cetera. So I don't know if the city manager would like to add anything on inquiries.
Just briefly, I think the grass cutting example or the weed example was a good one. And I know that, and I don't think anybody in administration would ever try and remove the ability of a citizen to contact a counselor or of a counselor to do what they feel they need to do. So we certainly get that. I think that 311 has a lot of potential. And to the extent that we can, I would really support this notion of moving citizens. If it's a routine request that can be answered quickly by 311, then great. Because I'll give you an example with the weed one. We've had a couple come in the last few weeks, and we're happy to, if they come in, we're happy to look at them. But, you know, for that to come into a councillor or to the mayor's office and then come to the city manager's office, to then go from the city manager and email out to somebody on the senior management team, then down to another, when you add that stuff up, you do have to ask yourself, does this make sense? Is this what we should be doing? But I also understand that if I was in your shoes, I'd want to be solving every problem that came to my door just about. So somewhere in the middle would probably be a good place to land. And I think, you know, there are those complaints or concerns that citizens would bring to council that are obviously of a nature that they wouldn't meet 311. Or they wouldn't get the answer from 311. And you may have citizens who go to 311 and aren't satisfied and then reach out to a counselor. But I do think there is a real role for this service, and the 311 service is getting pretty capable of answering specific questions and not just giving standard responses. So I think this is something that would be really interesting to pursue and see how it works.
So a couple of questions, if I can, Madam Chair. First one, is it possible then to ask people if you know, if it's going to kind of be you know, the public doesn't necessarily understand the separation between governance and operations. We're the governing body. However, I use emails as an understanding of maybe there needs to be a policy adjustment. Probably the most frustrating at the moment is garbage, and we have 2 emails this morning relating to garbage pickup, moving from back alley to street. Not a council decision, that was an operational decision, but maybe there's a policy consequence. So putting that information together, is it possible? So I don't know what that would be. You know, people are sending the emails to us, we've got a response from Mr. Hawkins that cut and paste and sort of reply. Is it possible then, if something's coming in, we ask citizens, do you want to tag a member of council on the reply? And then that way, because we're sensitive and our job is to help, and if you can make a citizen happy, theoretically that pays off in the next election, we'll call it what it is. But then that way it does at least keep that connection between operations and to a point governance. The other part of that is I would appreciate seeing some form of metric or dashboard or something on what the complaints are, because maybe this weed policy or maybe our weed policy needs to change or something. This is the feedback that I get from email complaints or email concerns that get sent. So are there policy changes that can be made? Is there something in the budget we could do?
And I would just jump in and say, I think to the first one, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. The second one, I think there's real potential, and I've been wondering, we get weekly rollouts in 311. They're up at this level, so they wouldn't give you a sense or the ability to say, aha. I think there might be a policy issue here quite yet, but they're moving there. And I think those should be standard submissions to council every 2 weeks. Like there's real potential in that 311 service, and they're really moving their ability to mine the data and mine the complaints forward. So I think we could get to that point fairly soon.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
So the consensus is with a few little tweaks, generally we like this idea. It's another way for the public to get in contact. It's another way to move forward. Now, if we move forward, is it we agree, or do we have to take it to council as a recommendation?
I'm going to look to
How about
City
update?
Manager Dalton to help with
Rather an
that.
update. Why don't we just do it as an update?
That's what I mean. We can take it as we've done this.
But yeah, but I think you have to come back with a decision from council rather than update, just saying this is what we're doing, just.
I mean, can we make the decision and let them know, or do we have to make a recommendation to council?
Carlson here.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I think we could probably just move towards this. I can't see any pushback from our colleagues if we're doing things to be more open and effective. It's our mandate. But definitely we need to have some sort of update to council, not only to keep council informed, which is 100% necessary, but also to inform the citizens of how things are changing.
What would change in process? That's sort of the big question for me. So I can, if I want to send an email to council, what changes in process?
This is an additional avenue to do that. They can still go to your pages and click on your picture or your email address and send you emails as well. We don't want to take that away at all, but this is just additional. So for process, I don't see much changing. You would get additional reporting from 311. You might get less operational emails.
So just looking
Madam
at that.
Chair?
Oh, just a second. CM Dalton's has going
Sorry.
first, and then I'll come to you.
Sorry, looking at Abbotsford's there, if when citizens went to the webpage to send an email, and they were given that additional option of 311 for operational issues with the examples that were there, garbage collection, et cetera, that would likely take some of the traffic away direct from council members. But to your concern, Councillor Kaufman, about losing sight of that information, if that then came, if the information on those operational issues then came back to council in the form of an assessed, here are the 27 complaints we've had this week on garbage, then you'd still get that information, and probably in a better way. And I would suspect that citizens that are still intent on going to a particular councillor because they've got a relationship, or they're still going to do that.
This is much more effective for people who don't even know we exist, right? They just know there's a council, but they don't know who we individually are. Go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. The auto response for the 110 and 120 inboxes, I think is brilliant. I can't believe we haven't implemented it already. The thing when the part where it says if you have a concern regarding city services or a service request, I think is very important, but many of our citizens won't understand what that exactly means. I think we should give some examples. If city services such as garbage, weeds, mowing, whatever, those types of potholes. I mean, these are the kinds of requests that I think Craig is saying they get sent to council, and then I send them on to the city manager because that's my only point of contact, and then it eats up a whole lot of administrative time on something that could have been answered by a 311 operator in 2 minutes. So as long as we really are sort of blunt or at least explicit on what we mean by city services and how, because I'm actually going to implement this on my own email. This makes perfect sense to me, so I stopped getting those. There's a cat wandering around my yard, and I do get those. So I think I'm going to implement this myself, but I think we just need to be a little more blunt on what those city services and service requests are.
Would have a link. I don't know if we can do a link in an auto email of the city services. We'll look at that. Thank you for that feedback.
Chair, so Councillor Carlson's statement actually made me realize something. I am sending things to CM Dalton, obviously, as process. Is the reason why I'm not forwarding things to 311. Like if somebody sends me I clearly know what's operational, what's governance, and if somebody sends me an operational question, why am I sending them to the city manager? No
That's
offense.
just.
I mean, you're my one and only employee, and I've been trained to do that, which is the appropriate thing to do. At the same time, if it's an operational question, who am I to forward it to at 311?
This might actually train us to do it, though, right?
Is there, and I don't want to create a special line. However, is there a special line for members of council to go, thank you, you've sent me the email, thank you.
There is.
I'm going to forward this to 311, and then we send it to somebody who can respond, and we are automatically copied on the answer. Like, I would prefer your time be taken up with strategic planning and overall oversight of the organization, as opposed to why was my garbage can knocked over and not replaced the way it was? Is that something that we could?
I don't know if there is right now, because I think the point of going to the website is registration. So I'll have to contact, is it Travis? Travis Hilliard and see. I think they want them to register and use the portal, but.
But I'd say that 99% of operational questions, the sincere operational questions, cat in my yard or whatever the case may be, those people are great citizens that will usually put their name and their address and a phone number or something at the bottom. So forwarding it on to 311. The politically rhetorical questions are not ones that we would forward to 311. They aren't always signed either. We have learned, I think, over the years to deal with those. But it's just the operational one. It just struck me now, why am I taking up Craig's time when I could be sending it to 311 who may have the answer?
I think that's a logical request, and definitely look into that.
It'd also be better for, I think, data collection. Because as you identified, you can use 311 or you can send it directly to a member of council. Well, okay, so the dashboard tells me you've had 271 complaints. I've had 7, but I don't know what each of these people have had as well. And are they the same complaints? If we're running it through 311, that's our data repository as well. Just thinking out loud, I throw that out for consideration.
That would also let council members see the reply too. So it wouldn't just be a handoff, you'd actually be, yeah.
We're adding another step in, but let's go back to the original one. Do we want, I know, we always go further than we start, but do we want to move ahead on this? Both the auto reply, which I think everybody agrees, I don't know why we're not doing that yet, and do we want the portal? Again, another avenue for the public to get in touch.
I like the idea of the portal.
Then we go back to, do we just say go ahead with it and tell our colleagues we've done it?
I'm in agreement with that as well.
Okay, so on our next report to council, we will inform them that we've moved ahead on this and explain it to them what we're doing.
Okay. It might take some time to set up with 311, so we'll have to let you know the time frame. Thank you.
As you can, that fits in with your schedule.
Take that. Monday.
Monday's a holiday, don't be asking for things on Monday.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it.
We move to item 4.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Carlson.
Sorry, just a quick question for maybe a bit of a philosophical debate. How public do our individual emails need to be? And I know in other communities where they actually have assistants to individual counselors, etc., all the emails go to the assistant unless the counselor has shared their private email, private phone number, etc., with individuals. And I'm just wondering about the optics or legality of that. It would, because right now people do try and circumvent the system. They send to the 120, they send to the 110, and then they copy and paste every individual counselor's email in them. And I'm just wondering if there was a centralized place for, like, if you want to contact Counselor Jeff Carlson, email assistant at blah, 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 and then they would forward them on as required. It's more of a philosophical discussion on that rather than, but it kind of ties into this.
Ms. Hilford, do you have an answer?
Yeah, I've seen a varied range on contact methods for council. Some websites will have, for a municipality, every councillor has a different mode of being communicated to. Some will put their Twitter accounts, some will put their personal email addresses, some will put nothing at all. There's one municipality that if you try and email all of them, it goes into one email and emails the mayor and all the councillors at one time. So the mayor's is not split from council. So that's as per the MGA that they get the same information at the same time. That was that thinking. So it's whatever I think council wants or individual councillors want that we can make happen.
Okay, so your philosophical question has an actual answer. You could make a choice for yourself, or you could make a recommendation for all of us.
And I would just like to know what my colleagues think. As I said, I have experience with other counselors across the country who will give me their email address because they don't want to be flooded with spam, with junk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so they hold those fairly guardedly. But there is still the opportunity for the public to connect with them through the main channels, just not as heavily publicized and on an individual basis. So I'm just not sure. I'm trying to limit council getting flooded with spam, with all sorts of stuff that really detracts from us doing our job rather than helps us doing our job. So just a thought.
Yeah, I'm fine with the emails I get as long as people realize I'll get back to you within a week. Probably not going to be today. So for me, it works okay.
And that's the Lethbridge.ca. It's not your personal or anything. Yep.
My personal one, I get way more on. All right, let's move to 4.3.
Sorry, if I can just add something in here as well. For me, Councillor Carlson, I think that's what falls into the orientation and the component of the procedure bylaw that I have always pushed for, is that we're 9 individuals and all of us have different approaches to data management, to communication, and in respect of what the clerk said, I think this has to be individually crafted at the beginning of one's term, with the opportunity, of course, to mold it. We do have a colleague. We do have a colleague on council who actually responds individually to every email that comes in, and I think diverting emails to a messenger or an intermediary would be very concerning to that individual. While I don't appreciate spam, stuff does occasionally appear in my mailbox that I actually appreciate reading or receiving because it's more information or it applies to something else that I'm considering. So that said, it would be nice to have somebody providing responses to me for me. I have an autoresponder set up so that when an email receives, I do make the 72-hour commitment, which I'm meeting 4% of the time. So there are ways of managing it, but I would always come down on the side of we have 9 different approaches to how we deal with information and data. And I think the organization needs to do as much as it can to accommodate 9 different approaches, understanding resources and whatnot. But I agree with what you say. The opportunity should be there.
I think I'm the only one who chose not to get a cell phone, and that's because I don't like cell phones. So it is personal choice.
Right, and I think, Councillor Kaufman, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think as the next orientation for the council is happening, there should be maybe some time put aside for a fulsome discussion on this. Is how would you like to be communicated with? Because right now it's pretty much boilerplate. On the bio page is your email, your phone number, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe it just needs to be a little more thoughtful discussion going into that.
Lucky thing is we get to help set up the orientation. So that will be coming, and I know Bonnie made notes of what was said.
Noted, and I think it's a good suggestion. We'll put it in the policy for council orientation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go on to format and process for council inquiries. That's you.
Perfect. Are you okay if I present from here?
Sure.
Excellent. This is a continuation, a rehash of the presentation that was provided in January of this year with regards to the inquiry process. Recommendation number 4, I believe it was, within the governance review, spoke to formalizing the inquiry process that council currently undertakes at their meetings of administration. And we've highlighted in this report kind of a draft process that could be employed to inquiries prior to a meeting, inquiries at a meeting, and inquiries for additional information after or during a presentation. So just looking for members of OAG here to provide any feedback and or the ultimate, hopefully, recommendation to take it to your council colleagues, codify it within the procedure bylaw, and implement.
Everybody's quickly reading it. Does that mean we didn't read it before? I'm just teasing.
For written inquiries, am I correct?
Written inquiries, we have the form that's attached.
And I know our practice is that we are, even the mayor said it yesterday, I think it's nice to have something in writing before so administration has the time to come back with a response and all that. By following what you're recommending here, is it still going to be an opportunity to do the vocal thing, the verbal?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. So
Does the verbal have to tie in with the written part, or can the verbal be a separate inquiry? I know, I think, do you know what I'm saying here?
what we have is, what we have, as much as possible, it should tie in, but if something comes up that needs to be addressed, you always have the option of having a verbal inquiry. That cannot be taken away from any member of council. But this is, the hope here, the plan is to give administration time to bring a response rather than having to come back to a future meeting.
We highlighted on there as well oftentimes inquiries are made, the responses are provided after a meeting, and the public is actually left outside of the loop. By closing that information loop as the governing body, you've helped your constituents understand the response that's been provided. It's kind of a furthermore of what Bonnie just presented as well in regards to your public inquiries.
So would we recommend that we try it? Right?
In theory, yes.
Yeah, I don't think any member of council has an expectation that if you're asking a question at a meeting, you'll receive an answer at the meeting. I do believe, though, that it's that written response that is supposed to be significant. I think most, if not all of us, use it to message or to get something back to constituents or a constituent. But if it's in writing and comes back in writing, I think that's a much better format, as long as the opportunity is never limited. But that needs to be addressed through a preparation on our part. I was actually smiling because I think maybe in a way to get members of council to read the Municipal Government Act, to ask them which section of the MGA their inquiry refers to.
We can put that in there
I'd love
and
to
see if it's taken out at council.
Nobody uses the form. No, I think implement, propose, and start following it.
We'll take it to the August 10th meeting as a recommendation for our colleagues.
Question.
Go ahead.
I figured just following up on the inquiries made at a meeting, I believe right now the process is that they remain verbal and they just form part of the video and record. Would it be even better to any inquiries made at a meeting are then transferred to to this form, perhaps, the written inquiry, and they form part of the record at the next meeting?
Yep, we can definitely do that.
Add that as another step.
Just so that somebody doesn't have to actually click through an entire video to try and figure that out, if the question was asked or not, and listen to whatever was happening. But if it forms part of the next meeting, those responses are always captured.
Or maybe as part of the consent agenda, or added into section 9 currently.
Whichever way is easiest.
I would suggest section 9. That way, all inquiries are always captured in the same spot.
Good thing we're talking about section 9s and not section 8s.
But doesn't that occur already?
I think we had a section 8 yesterday at council, if I recall.
Does that not already occur? If I make a verbal inquiry, that's actually recorded in the minutes.
It is, yes, for sure.
So the only difference would be someone from staff would put it into the form for us
Right.
after the fact.
So it's not in the written minutes? All it is just the header, really, because as soon as we start putting a response, and then it's open to interpretation, because we may not pick the most important thing in your view.
Further on top of that is within the digital copy of the minutes, if you go on and hopefully the video from yesterday's meeting will be posted here within the hour, you will be able to actually click on Councillor Carlson, you made an inquiry or an update, and you could click on that. It'd be timestamped to that exact moment in the meeting. And so the public member, whoever's looking at that, will go there automatically. It is not verbatim written down, though.
Yeah, David's right. It's just the title. Yeah, because some of the questions are quite long and so for us to summarize that, we kind of think is dangerous, so we do the link. But if you write it as you want it on the form, then it will go in the minutes like that.
We'll try to make it practice that even if you give a verbal one, you'll fill out the form afterwards. That might limit inquiries from people. All right, so this will take forward to August 10th. Then, any other questions, anything I've missed that anybody's like, that I want to know?
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I do have a question about inquiries, and perhaps it can be codified in our procedural bylaw, which I sadly don't have in front of me. I'm not sure it's codified there as it stands. But I think Councillor Coffin mentioned something that intrigued me. That you have to, he tied it to the MGA, but whether it's a written or a verbal inquiry, I think before the inquiry is stated, perhaps it needs to be, what is your inquiry about? And I'm trying to stave off situations like yesterday.
What's he talking about?
The chair,
It does have subject in the form, right? There is a subject that you have to say what it's about. Do you mean more detail than that?
well, I'm thinking that the same format, even if it's verbal, should be followed.
Oh, okay. So recommending.
So that do procedure. So an inquiry, Councillor Carlson buzzes in, the chair says, the mayor says, or deputy, whoever, says, Councillor Carlson, what is your inquiry about, et cetera, et cetera. So we follow the same format.
Okay, so we can try to make it practice that, again, people will say what they want to say, but we can recommend that you try to follow the same verbal as written, because you're going to have to write it anyways.
Exactly.
Yeah, if your intent is to stop what happened yesterday from happening, I would buzz in and say that my inquiry is on New West Theatre, and then I would be talking about Councillor Carlson at one point wearing Spanx and a bra and high heels, and ask for an apology for the mental image I now carry. So I have the ability to begin down a road I probably shouldn't be going down, but I can use whatever language I want. I understand your intent, but I don't think it will ever stop it.
Agreed. It'll also just help capturing the actual format for the clerk. It'll eliminate a lot of that ambiguity. But I agree. You can't stop people from saying whatever they will say.
Yeah.
And I believe yesterday was a one-off in the last number of weeks.
Yes. Well, I think we know where we're going with that, so we'll move on to 4.4.
If I can just add, with my experience of these written inquiries, they were, if we did have them prior to, they were read by the chair, and then there was no debate on them. So it's something you might want to consider for procedure bylaw.
Okay, so we could have the chair, Lisa. Perfect. All right, 4.4, Mr. Dalton, advocacy and engagement support.
Yes, so the OBR that was introduced was referred to this committee for further discussion, so I'm able to provide a little bit of additional information about the work that Ms. Kiss did provide. I would say it's not, it might not be the detail that the committee might be looking for. Anyway, I'll go through this list, and I'm happy to try and expand on any of these. So Crown Strategic Consulting provided support in the following key areas of work. One, increased awareness with provincially elected officials, administration, and senior political appointees in the priorities of the City of Lethbridge. Two, highlighted opportunities where the City of Lethbridge could establish strategic partnerships in particular areas like agriculture, investment, and technology. Supported the development of a more targeted approach with government based on clearly outlined priorities for Lethbridge. Cultivated opportunities for the City of Lethbridge with a deeper understanding of what the community has to offer on the agricultural front to support the exhibition project. Encouraged a stronger marketing and social media campaign. Worked with previous city manager to structure the Recovery Lethbridge framework to capitalize on future announcements related to COVID. Initiated the concept of an investment platform that would complement the current work of economic development in Lethbridge, but would be more in line with the strategic direction of the Government of Alberta, and provided political intelligence, insight, and advice on relationship building with all levels of government. I would add to that I've had the opportunity to work with Ms. Kiss on 3 or 4 particular issues, a number of which she's mentioned there. In particular, the notion of a concept of an investment platform, which has led to some further work in the administration on Lethbridge lands and how we approach development and investment in general in the corporation. And I would add that from the perspective of somebody new to the organization, although we have a plan to create an intergovernmental relations position, not a position, but we're going to assign those duties on the administration side to the Chief of Staff, that Ms. Kiss has certainly been helpful in helping us develop some of these relationships over the past couple of months that I've been here. But again, I recognize that this is relatively subjective and descriptive, but I'm happy to expand on any of that or answer any specific questions.
And thank you very much, Mr. Dalton. I appreciate the answer. I agree. Ms. Kiss she did a great job, huge value. I agree. And I think what you just said there, what are the deliverables? Even though they weren't like 1.5, 2.5. But I think if we had your submission to our next council meeting, that would be the deliverables, the context and all that, and then we could entertain questions from there. Because I think we just didn't have, like what you just said there, we didn't have that at the council meeting. So I think a lot of people go, well, what did we get? Because I have to be able to justify after I vote for this, when I go back to the community, what I get. But what you just said there, really paraphrased and kind of sums up exactly what we got. So I would hope that would be a part of the submission, which comes at the next council meeting, because I think it was supposed to come back at the next council meeting, because I do believe, the contract does come to an end this month, am I correct? So,
It ends in July.
and would you be fine with submitting that, what you just read to us?
Certainly, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you. I really liked it.
So you're thinking we take that and recommend it back?
Yeah.
And recommend that we do renew the contract?
Well, I think it was in the resolution, was it to come back August 10th, 2020, so
You have to take it back.
we have to take it back.
But you're taking it back as an affirmative, renew the contract.
Well, that's what I want to know, members of OEG, but.
Counselor Kaufman, any opinion on it?
No, I appreciate what the CAO has provided and agree with Councillor Parker on that.
Counselor Carlson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I don't know if we want to dive into a bit more of thoughtfulness on this, value for money, etc. I just look at this as a standard. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's $5,000 a month plus $1,000 expenses, whether services are used or not. And I'm just wondering if there's other ways to approach such services. It's hard to justify to the community that we're going to pay $5,000 plus $1,000 expenses in December when council and the government is not meeting. It's questions like that that I know we'll get. So those are the things I think I'd like us to sort of discuss a bit.
The one thing I was also thinking is, we know that other places have them. It might be useful to have a list of who has them and what they're paying those people. Because yes, we're spending money, but are we saving money at the same time? Councillor Parker.
Thank you, and just a question to you, Councillor Carlson. Are you thinking more like an a la carte, kind of picking what you want? Go ahead.
I don't know that that's an option, but just being told, no, it's $5,000 a month whether you use my services or not, doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
That's
so
a good point.
That's why I'm willing to discuss possibilities.
We can come back with some, do some work and come back with further information on that.
Councillor Kaufman, I know you had something you were going to say.
Yeah, actually, I think the one thing, and the community needs to understand on this particular matter is that things are different in Edmonton, and it's a slightly different political climate. And so the advice that we receive is really the advice of somebody who has been a little deeper inside than what we're normally used to. And what she is providing, the work that she has done has helped us move a couple of issues. And that's, I think point blank, that's the statement that needs to be shared with the community, is that we're paying for some advice. It's not insider trading or insider information, but it's about somebody who knows how to navigate things with this particular administration. And that has been, we can demonstrate some success in that.
Well, I think that's part of it. The other thing we're dealing with is the political angle, because there's still people who think that somehow it's a slap at Nathan Newdorf to do, which is never intended to be. It's a different mechanism entirely. But I think that is the other thing that we have to deal with, is making a better explanation to the public that we value what he does greatly, but this does give us an insight and information that is outside of what he can do within his position. So I think that's another area that we're dealing with. But I think with the information that we have, and if we can get that extra information, that we'd be ready to take it back August 10th to council. That's the consensus I'm kind of getting from everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Dalton, for that. Appreciate it.
Question?
Yes.
I think part of, and I'm sorry I didn't open the resolution, but the discussion was where the funding should come from.
Oh, right. They wanted it out of OEG, and we were suggesting it come out of.
Travel and convention or something.
We still okay with the travel budget? Right? Because I'm like, yeah. We said we're limiting travel, so there's money there. I would prefer it not come out of OEG. So are you okay with that, Councillor?
I would second that.
Okay. we'll take it back with that.
Mr. Dalton, you're gonna inquire in regards, sorry, Madam Chair, in regards to $1,000, in regards to travel and all that, since the first time we met her, I think Kathy came down once or twice, but ever since kind of think lockdown, we haven't had to have her travel. Can you kind of maybe just inquire regarding that travel expense for us?
Sure, to see whether it's been paid or claimed,
Or is it needed?
Is it needed?
Because
Yes.
when,
Yeah,
when, the, when, the,
certainly.
when the first contract was written, it was under the expectations she'd be traveling down, but obviously that's not happening. We're doing a lot of things by phone, by, what's the other one? Zoom?
Yep.
So, thank
Yeah,
you.
certainly.
So we actually did that inquiry already. And so what's happened is it's up to $1,000 per month. In fact, because there really has been limited opportunities for travel, there's been less than, as of end of last month, there was less than $3,000 spent in total.
So maybe in Mr. Dalton, when he does his summary, he would just show a final budget of how much money has been spent.
Yeah,
That
so
would be
like,
appreciated.
yeah, so like the mayor did report at the last meeting that there had been $28,000 expended, and of which 3,000 was related to the travel.
Okay. Obviously, we don't remember hearing that. Okay. We move now to 4.5, Boards, Commissions, and Committee Day. So you have the attachment, which has the template. This has been sent out to all the boards, committees, and commissions. I believe they did something similar in the spring, and they're just asked to review it, and they'll have that information, and they will be coming to us, I can't remember the day off the top of my head right now.
September 14th.
14th. And so that will be a day at the CIC where we'll be learning about all of them. Is there anything that you guys have? Is there something you want to hear on those days, or are you just ready for whatever they present following this template?
Question.
Go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the BCC Day, everyone is doing a submission.
Yes.
And forgive me because I joined OEG, I think, halfway through this process. So everyone's doing a submission, and some groups are invited to present, or all groups are presenting. I'm a little unclear.
Okay.
On the January 30th OEG meeting, we asked the question, what BCCs you would like to write a submission and which ones you would like to present. So we did get the list of the groups that you wanted to report. And for presenting, the OEG committee had asked that nobody present, but the chairs be in attendance to answer any questions that the committee has. Now, if you want to change that direction, we're fine with new direction to provide the BCCs.
We thought that would be fair to all, and that would then mean the council could direct questions to whomever they wished. Does that work for you, Councillor Carlson?
I guess so. I'm just wondering the time frame, having a bunch of many volunteers sit in council chambers for 4 hours and either may not get a question or may get a question at the very end. I'm just wondering if there's a better approach.
Do you have a suggestion for a better approach?
I don't.
Councillor Carlson, Ryan here. We've received approximately 6 reports already with a very enthusiastic response from each of the boards, committees, and commissions that have already submitted, who are looking forward to actually coming and being available for that. And we have slated this to be the start of that meeting as well.
And also, sorry if I could add that we could maybe block time for maybe 6 at a time per hour, if that works.
We could try that. And perhaps we could block it sort of by our SPCs that we're trying to create.
I was just going to say, yeah, maybe have the quasi-judicial boards in one grouping, and the advisories at another, something like that.
That way they'd only have to block an hour or so of their time. Councillor Kaufman.
Is there a possibility for Zooming and phoning?
Thought of that, yeah. Hopefully by then, yes, we will have the technology in the chamber.
Create that opportunity for them, and then that actually might even be easier, and then we can be messaging with people and saying, turn on Zoom or get ready to phone. Just, I think it's better respect to people's times.
And I know, again, it's volunteer time and what they have, but I know when I presented at provincial organizations, I chose, and most of us chose to come for the whole thing because we also want to learn about the others, and we want to see how we fit into the bigger structure. So some may wish to just be part of all of it.
When we're communicating to the boards, commissions, and committees, did you want the chair there, the chair and the resource, or chair and the vice, or what would you be looking for?
Well, I think from them, they're going to want the chair and their resource, right? Like, I mean, they're going to want both, if someone wants, but the chair for sure, right? The rest, if they can make it, they're welcome, based on what we can have in the room at that time. That's the other difficulty, is going to be spacing. I don't think we're going to be better by September.
Ryan, I think you were looking for this form to be completed from OEG, or has it been?
Hasn't, that would be the preference, is to have OEG. OEG was signified at the January 30th meeting as also submitting a report. So if members of the committee and or the chair would like to undertake that, myself and or my team are available to assist and will gladly do so.
Want us to take a stab at
Question.
it?
Go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. As chair of another BCC, I basically asked our administration to go through the form and fill out as best they can, and then if they need anything from the chair or the committee, they can come back and ask. Further to that, is Recovery Lethbridge going to be asked as well?
They haven't sent it to me yet. Why would you remind them I exist?
Sorry.
That's a good question, because when back in January, it hadn't existed. So it's one of those that have popped up that I don't know, did we send that email out to them, Ryan? Probably not.
Didn't. I got the MPC one, but I didn't get Recovery Lethbridge.
Yeah.
We can do it.
So it probably should be included. You're right, Councillor Carlson.
I will be here that day anyways.
Okay.
All right. And a reminder, I know I reminded all of council, but a reminder as well that the week before and the week after, there'll also be council meetings about it. The week before, Joyce will be coming down, and we will be working on which BCCs we think councillors should actually be on moving ahead.
With Joyce? Okay.
Because she knows our governance review, she has an understanding. And the week after,
It was just to review the boards.
Which should
any
exist and
tweaks
which
to the
shouldn't.
governance or any revisions at all to the structures.
so there's the 3 days, but one public day around this. All right, everybody feel we've covered BCCs okay? Strategic initiatives, 6.1, which we had a media inquiry about today. I don't think there's anything to discuss at this point, because how SBCs come out and everything will actually have a greater impact on that than anything we're working on. So we jump to 6.2, and you've been waiting so quietly. Diversity and inclusion professional development. See, we would get to you eventually.
I can be much louder if you like.
That's okay.
Okie Sonatapi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tamara Mackey, and I'm the city's Diversity and Inclusion Specialist in the Human Resources Department. And I was asked to come to speak to you today about professional development available to City Council. So that's what I'll be presenting. Are you clicking for me? Super, let's click. So I'll be talking about the training that's available for council now, and also for new council orientation, and also the professional development that has already taken place for city staff. I can give you numbers if you're interested in that, and then there's a number of other professional development opportunities that would be available to you as well. So I wanted to start with what's available to city staff right now, and what I've created is a number of courses, and then we have a couple of courses that we're borrowing. So there's a course called Human Rights in the Workplace, and that is, I think it's about a 2 or 3 hour course. Most of them are about 2 or 3 hour little workshops, interactive. Intercultural Competence, we had Beth Enns from the Public Library read-on program delivering that. However, she is moving away, so I will be presenting that. That's what my master's degree is in, is International Intercultural Communication. So we will continue to deliver that course, Unconscious Bias. It's interesting how that came about. The next course that's listed is 50 Ways to Fight Gender Bias. So we have at the city a group of staff who are involved in what is called the Lean In and Lead Together group, and it's about gender equity, and that group has been established for a number of years before I came last year. And through the Lean In program on their website, they have a course that anybody can have access to, and it's called 50 Ways to Fight Bias. However, if you look at it, it's specifically related to gender bias. So we wanted to add gender bias to the title, and we created an unconscious bias course that is a prerequisite to take the gender bias course. We're also offering the Kairos blanket exercise. I'm a facilitator of that, and we also are hoping, once things change a little bit, that we can start to gather in person, that the Kairos community is going to be coming to the city of Lethbridge to do a train the trainer session, so that we are building capacity within the organization to deliver the Kairos blanket exercise. So we would be offering it to city staff, as well as some members in the community who are involved with the Lethbridge Diversity and Inclusion Alliance, Lethbridge Interfaith Network, Southern Alberta Ethnic Association, and Local Immigration Partnership. So some of the groups that we're already working with. We had the good fortune last year, Constable Les Vonkeman from Lethbridge Police Services offers up a teepee camp in collaboration with an elder out at the Kainai Reserve. And so we had a number of city staff take part in that as well. And it was a it's 2-day, 1-night camp out on the reserve at an elder's home, staying in a camp teepee, and also having opportunities to chat with elders, go on a walk with Ryan Heavyhead to learn about the land and so on. I have a couple of new courses that I'm starting to deliver this fall, Engaging Ethnocultural Communities, and that's based on a document that was created at the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association when I was the program manager for Welcoming Inclusive Communities there. And then also addressing racism and discrimination. When we did the diversity and inclusion questionnaire with city staff last fall, that was one of the items that they were interested in having available to them. So addressing racism and discrimination will be new. I think you're probably familiar with the Bon Venant program that was developed in community social development a number of years ago. It was put on hold, and we're actually working on a revamp of that program, also renaming and rebranding. And we are going to be creating, and I should say when I say we have members of our internal diversity and inclusion working group, as well as members from the community, including Lethbridge Diversity and Inclusion Alliance, who are working on revamping this program. And it will include a train the trainer program as well, again, building capacity, so for city staff to deliver it internally, but also for the community members to deliver it to other community members. And then we're working with Pamela Beebe from our Indigenous Relations Coordinator. She and I are getting started on Indigenous awareness training that was identified as a need when Perry Stein did his report on what was needed for city work on reconciliation. So those are some of the courses that have already been delivered. Are you interested in the numbers, or would you like me to continue?
No, I continue, and we can talk more about numbers
again. Okay, that sounds great. So other employee engagement that has happened, I mentioned the Lean In and Lead Together course already, and that we've done that as a train the trainer session. We have the internal diversity and inclusion working group, and that's made up of different staff who are working on diversity and inclusion related programs or initiatives. So they meet once a month. Last year, we delivered the AUMA's Municipal Inclusion Assessment, so we have a report that was that came out of that as well, and we created an action plan with items to help move the needle towards more of a culture of inclusion. We've also just completed work on an inclusive language manual. That was actually something that came to me from another staff member as an example from what the City of Oshawa had put together. And with permission from the City of Oshawa, the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group took different parts within the manual and put more of a local context onto it. And it's quite a robust document. I think it's 81 pages long, and we'll be sharing that on our CityWise page fairly soon. We also have a small subcommittee from the Diversity Working Group that's working on an inclusive procurement policy. We're working on an internal interpreters program as well, building on something that actually David Sarsfield already had started, and that's going to be something where staff who speak other languages can update their profile on CityWise to include the languages that they speak, and then they can toggle whether or not they're willing and able to take part in interpretation in the moment. It would be offered as like business hours for now, but it's something that probably could be developed into, you know, when we have emergency situations and we have to communicate to various communities. Yeah, I think there was one other thing that I might have forgotten to mention with that one. Engagement. No? Okay, that's okay. My mind is very full right now. So what I wanted just to reiterate is any of the courses that I've mentioned are available to City Council. It just would be a matter of booking me and we can deliver it to you. So whatever is of interest. Wanted to just make sure that everyone's aware that we are not going to be delivering the Kairos blanket exercise because it is an interactive workshop that people are standing very close together, so we'll be waiting until things change a bit with the COVID-19 restrictions before we deliver that again. There was also a question about what might we offer for the next council in terms of orientation after the next municipal election. So I thought it might be really good to just remind council or teach new council members about the involvement of City of Lethbridge and the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities, because we were actually one of the first municipalities to join on to that coalition. And there are 10 common commitments that you may be familiar with, but maybe not. So we would include that as well. And then education on the value of diversity and inclusion, perhaps the business case for diversity, if that is helpful for you, and key messaging when you're speaking to the community. I can also share the Diversity Inclusion Action Plan that the Diversity Inclusion Working Group has created, as well as my own work plan that I had created. We have plans to do an annual diversity and inclusion report, and actually I was scheduled to come to council in March to present to council on the work that was done last year, but of course things changed a little bit in February and March, and so I think we're planning to come in September, and it will be more of a year-and-a-half review of the work that's been done to date. And that again is going to include the internal and the external initiatives, and then some key messages around diversity and inclusion. So sometimes people are able to speak off the cuff on messaging, but sometimes it's a little bit more challenging, and that can include the course around addressing racism and discrimination when it happens as well. Other development opportunities. You can access the federal government's Gender-Based Analysis Plus course online. It's not just around gender. It does speak to many aspects of diversity, intersectionality as well. The University of Alberta has an Indigenous Canada online course that you can participate in. SEPA has a plain language course that was offered to city staff, but council could take that as well. And then we have 3 courses that were delivered by Outreach Southern Alberta. So they did Queer 101, Inclusive Spaces, and Productive Allyship. And those are also courses. They're outside the organization, but we would bring those in for you as well, if you would be interested in those. So some of the resources that have been developed, the employment equity policy, we had, HR 24 was a policy that was diversity in the workplace, but it's become more robust, and it's specifically around employment equity. We're delivering, we're going to be creating procedures and strategy that will coincide with this policy, and I think it's just in the process of final approval right now. We have created a handbook for supporting transitioning employees, so anybody who has a staff member who is transitioning from one gender to another, there's a resource that they can refer to with communication plan, what human resources needs to do, and it's all about working with the person that's going through the transition. I mentioned the Inclusive Language Manual, and I'm also working on an inclusive meetings article and checklist for city staff, and council can refer to that as well. And yeah, that's everything. So I'm not sure if you have any questions, but.
Well, this group usually has questions. Are there any questions from members of council? Councillor Kaufman.
Thanks for the information, actually, greatly appreciate that. So when we're talking about professional development for council, training update for the corporation, training available for council now. When you're talking about that, that's council as the collective. So the 9 of us get into a room and we do something. Whereas the other opportunities, other professional development opportunities for council, the GBA Plus, the Indigenous Canada program, those are all individual resources or can be done on their own time?
That's right, yes.
Okay. Is the intent then to include the collective training at or about or around orientation?
The courses can be anytime. Like if you wanted to schedule something next week, I can deliver for you. We're going to be delivering the courses again starting this fall through an MS Teams format for now, just because of the space issue. But yes, those courses are available to you right now. And then next year, after the new council is elected, you know, some of them, it might be a group effort, or it could be the, you know, few new members or however many new members there would be to update them with the information.
Give my ignorance on this. Is the Kairos blanket exercise, is it focused on Blackfoot, on Blackfoot culture, or is it in Indigenous relations?
So what the Kairos blanket exercise has been around for about 15 years, and so Kairos is a social justice group across Canada based on ecumenical churches, and they worked in partnership with Indigenous communities across Canada to create the blanket exercise. But I'm glad you asked that question, and I should have mentioned this. One of the things that I'd spoken to some of the members from Reconciliation Lethbridge Advisory Committee about was there's some interest in putting more of a Blackfoot voice and experience into the script, and Kairos does allow edits to their script. We just have to send the final version in. So that's something that we are going to be working with through RLAC as well to create more of a local context to it. Yes.
That's good. We had Bob Joseph come in and do, has he done 2 sessions? He's done 1 session for sure with council, which was a wonderful session, but it's missing the local cultural context, because just to say all Indigenous people are the same is like saying, you know, all Canadians are the same.
Yeah, we agreed.
We're not, and there are cultural contexts around Blackfoot community, Blackfoot organization. You know, we had the conversation at RLAC about who's an elder and how do you create that definition. So I think specifically we would be looking for something that is Blackfoot focused or Blackfoot oriented, or can be led by the Blackfoot community, putting the overlay in. Here's how we relate. Here's what we do, here's how we organize ourselves, and here's how you can connect into that, or how you shouldn't connect into that.
Yes.
That's a lens that we need.
Yes. And we agree with everything you're saying. So that would be, you know, adding on that piece of the local voice. That will also be included in a separate module or session that is Indigenous cultural awareness training that we're developing as well. So that is in collaboration with the community, local community as well.
Okay, thanks. If I can, Madam Chair, just one final question. On the ones that you can do by yourself, is this just signing up, or do we go through a certain portal through the city to get there? How do individual members?
Anybody who has access to the internet can sign up, so you don't have to do anything through the city. You can just, I can send the links actually, maybe that would be most helpful. I'll send the links to those and they can distribute to council. Gender-Based Analysis Plus is a course online that the federal government has, and it's free to take part. And the Indigenous Canada program through the University of Alberta, there's 2 different things. You can actually sign up, pay, and get, it's a accredited course, but you can also just audit the course and go through it. And it's, again, that's free.
What's our policy then on doing that? I'll maybe look at Bonnie or David in terms of if I were to sign up for the Indigenous Canada course, for example, but do it as credited as opposed to audit, is that reclaimable through the city, or is that just out of pocket?
Or we're spending all of your travel budget on.
Some of it, yeah, some of it.
Provided you get approval from the city manager, I guess is what the resolution just said yesterday. There should be an issue.
I just to know if that's, if we're going to be talking to council about having these individual opportunities, then the policy actually then needs to address how council can access them. Because it's not, I mean, if we pay for it ourselves, that's fine, but is it done through or in conjunction with our work here?
Right now, council has the opportunity to have any training they wish, whether it be done as a group or as an individual. And so if you do find opportunities individually, you're welcome to do that. So I don't see how this is any different.
if there's a cost involved.
I assume it's the same as our travel budget. It would usually be paid through our assistant, or somebody would use a city credit card to pay for it.
So by policy, it requires the mayor's approval. Okay, thank you.
I add a couple of things that I just thought of that I didn't include here. So there's other opportunities as well for education through the community. The Lethbridge Diversity and Inclusion Alliance has a monthly meeting, and after each of their meetings, they have a lunch and learn session that anybody can take part in. So previous to COVID-19, the meetings are held at the Multicultural Center, and the whole community is welcome to come and take part in those lunch and learn sessions, and they are delivering it, I believe, on the Zoom platform right now. Another one is the Lethbridge Interfaith Network. They have delivered some training courses, and I think like one of the really well-attended ones was on death. So they had I think there were 6 different faith communities speaking about their beliefs on death, and I think we had 120 people attend that session. So that's another one, and that's free for anyone to attend as well. Yes.
So is there a desire to choose one for council to set something up for the fall? Because
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councillor Carlson.
Sure. I had some questions, if that's okay at this point, unless you wanted to discuss your question first.
No, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mackey, for the presentation and the information. A couple quick questions. I think it's slide 3, perhaps. It talks about the training update for the corporation. And you've listed a lot of the staff training that's gone on. Are those voluntary or mandatory?
So at present, they are voluntary. What you'll see in the new employment equity policy, however, is that anybody involved in the hiring processes are going to be expected to take some of these courses. So human rights in the workplace, intercultural competence, unconscious bias, 50 ways to fight gender bias, and Indigenous awareness, the cultural awareness training will be mandatory for anybody who's involved in the hiring process. From a human resources perspective, the Carol's blanket exercise is, we call it highly recommended. We haven't made anything else mandatory exactly. So we started the courses last fall, and at the time it was open to senior management and business unit managers, and then we ended up opening it up to other city staff. And so it's available for anybody who wants to take part, but we are not making it mandatory right now.
I guess on that, and maybe I'll ask for city manager's thoughts as well on this.
He has left the room, so.
Oh, he's still on maybe my screen has frozen because I can still see him. Anyways, my thoughts on this, that voluntary, it always seems to me to be the choir preaching to the choir. I've done the Kairos blanket exercise half a dozen times, but every time I do it, I almost find that it's the people that don't need the blanket exercise that are taking part, whereas the folks that actually need to have their worldview expanded, I'll put it that way, are the ones that never sign up for these things. And I know there would be a cost to the corporation, obviously, to make these things mandatory, but I'd like to hear the thoughts on that aspect.
Yes, I would love to share my thoughts on that aspect. So I've been doing diversity inclusion work for 14 or 15 years now, and the idea of, the work does appeal to the people who are already in an allyship or equity advocate role. However, my experience is that the people who are coming to the courses, as much as they are already on the side of diversity and inclusion, do not necessarily have the education and the tools to be the ally that they would like to be. And so these courses are increasing capacity for them to do better work and be better responsive to issues. So that's one thing. The other thing, when I first came on board, I was speaking with Jason Elliott, who is my manager, about ensuring that the courses are not punitive. So that is that if you have some kind of a conflict within the workplace, that somebody is made to take the course. My experience is that never does any good. So I think it's okay to appeal to the people who are interested in the courses for now. And the increased awareness, like as we have an increased awareness and the conversations expand, to staff meetings, we're looking at creating some toolkits for like that would go alongside with a safety talk, for example, once a month maybe, or once quarterly. And the message will still get out there. I think some of the people in the organization are still like not necessarily aware that I am here and that the courses are available, so we still need to work on some communication about that. But I think for now, like with the size of the organization, the people who are interested in coming are the ones that are coming. We haven't, like the numbers are low actually in terms of how many people have taken the courses to date. So I think it's okay if we're still building capacity, because they're going to be the diversity champions, and they will lead the way for others to hopefully have an interest in taking part.
I agree, but once again, I'll just say that the folks that have no interest in taking part are the ones that are most likely to need the training. I'm wondering if there's any thoughts on not making it mandatory or punitive, but incentivizing taking the course.
That interesting that you mentioned the incentivizing. So we also talked about creating a training matrix for diversity and inclusion related to the different levels within the organization. So if, for example, if you are a senior manager, that it's highly recommended that you take, here's your list of courses, so it would be all of these that you see on this slide. And then it could be tied into a performance management, like an annual review, and for people to have to demonstrate their competencies after they have taken the courses. So whether you're looking for a promotion or you're looking to be hired onto the organization, there would be questions around your competencies and different topics.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate that you're exploring that, because there's a way to do it. Sorry, I just got a funny text. And yes. The other questions I have, Madam Chair, if I can.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Ms. Mackey, do you do anything, I see the list here, is there anything focused in your bucket, so to speak, on things like accessibility? And I'm talking about like barrier-free type accessibility simulations, or poverty simulations?
When I worked at this, I'm sorry, is there more?
I was just going to say, to build on the diversity and inclusion aspect.
When I worked at the city of Red Deer, in basically the same role, I actually had created a certificate course for staff that included things like working in a multicultural setting, working with, in an interfaith setting, working with persons with disabilities, and so on. So I already have courses that are developed that we could expand and present. I'm not really familiar with all of the organizations. I've only been here for just 2 years, but I'm not. In Red Deer, there was an opportunity through the Canadian, no, it was the Brain Injury Society, and they did a chair, what was it called? You spent the day in a wheelchair to get the experience, have a better understanding of what some of the physical barriers are. There's other opportunities to have different types of scenarios that would impact your ability to hear, would impact your ability to see, would impact your ability to hold things. Those kinds of experiences are available. I have to explore what the resources are available in our community to do something like that. But if there's interest in that, and if there's any kind of interest in anything, I'm happy and willing to create those programs.
And thank you. I appreciate that. I think some of us have participated in the spend the day in the wheelchair exercise, and some others. The poverty one, I think it was the United Way, I believe, was offering that in town, and it would be a good one because we know our community has challenges with poverty, and they do affect people's ability to be included. So thank you for your willingness to explore those. Final question I had, and I'm sorry, actually, second final question, Madam Chair. Are your services available to sort of arm's length entities? And I'm thinking things like the GALT, the library, more importantly, the police commission.
In terms of the training?
Yeah, I think some of those entities, at least one of them, could definitely benefit from some of this.
Yes, all of them are welcome to take the training, and some of them have already. In fact, the Galt Museum has had me come and do a human rights session. There were a couple of sessions the Galt Museum had me come and do with their staff, and as well as the library. The Lethbridge Police Service, some of the members have taken part in some of the training as well, particularly the Kairos blanket exercise. So all of the courses are open to our affiliates.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate hearing that. And this is, I promise, Madam Chair, it's my final question at this point.
For the whole meeting or just on this topic?
This is, oh, never say never. On that same slide 3, can you unpack for me a bit about the bullets on unconscious bias? I'll just stick with that one for now. Can you tell me a bit about that one?
Sure. So one of the things that participants have to do before they come to the class is Harvard has got an Indigenous awareness tool that anybody, like all of you, could take part in doing different, there's sort of like what I would call activities, games, where you start to get a sense of what your own unconscious bias are, and then you bring the results to the course. We talk about why we have unconscious bias, some of the different biases that exist, like beauty bias, or like there's probably about 7 or 8 different kinds of bias, so what those all are, and then how do we rid ourselves of bias. And basically what I tell them at the end of the course is, it's nice that you've come to the class today. However, to get rid of our actual biases, we have to spend time with the populations that our biases are with, so that we can dispel some of the myths and assumptions and stereotypes that we have with those populations.
So would that tie in at all with like some of the exercises I've seen about identifying your privilege, or is it completely different?
We talk about power and privilege a little bit. That would come up more in the addressing racism and discrimination piece.
Okay, thank you. And Madam Chair, I'll shut up now for a bit.
So let's go back to one of the questions I asked earlier. Are there any that we think we should take to council in the next 4 or 5 months of the slate that she has brought forward? Because that is one of our responsibilities as a committee, is to recommend professional development for our colleagues.
Carlson here.
Yes, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. I kind of liked what I was hearing a bit about the unconscious bias. That might be something that may be appropriate for council. I wish we could do the Kairos blanket exercise with council and senior admin, but given COVID restrictions, that's quite out. But the unconscious bias seems interesting.
Might be useful to have it done before we have budget negotiations or budget deliberations.
Mm-hmm.
I could add to that. It would be very good for council to have before appointing people to the boards, commissions, committees as well. I've taken it, it's very good.
Sometime late September-ish. What do you guys think for
That's good.
possibility?
Yeah, absolutely.
It would be simply, we have to schedule you?
That's right.
Oh, well, that could be
You
easily
just
done.
call me.
So let's, yeah, take that to our colleagues for something late September. And with those two things in mind, right? Being ready to try to broaden who's on our boards, committees, and commissions.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councillor Carlson.
I really like that thought and timeline. Perhaps can I twist the question around after hearing Bonnie saying, I've taken that one as really good. Are there any recommended training sessions for council or information sessions for council that either Ms. Mackey or anyone who's taking these would think, man, council should really take that? Like, I don't know what I don't know.
If you could make a better council, which ones do you want us to take?
Exactly.
What are we doing wrong?
Yeah, exactly. And remember, we asked you.
Am I allowed to say all of them? So unconscious bias is a terrific one to start with, I would suggest. I also think human rights, and we would talk more about the Alberta Human Rights Act in general, not just in the workplace, because having a sense of what the areas and grounds are protected will help you with key messaging when you're responding to comments that you might hear in the community. So I would highly recommend human rights. Also, intercultural competence is really important. It is, like, the gender bias is a huge issue.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. We even, like, when we looked at the statistics, so this notion of reflecting the community that we serve in terms of the diversity of the demographics of city staff, one of the only statistics that we were able to pull is gender. And if we look at the community, our statistics are approximately 50-50 in terms of the binary male-female, with a very small percentage identifying with other genders. But within the organization, we have about 32 to 33% women who are working within the organization. And we could further look at the different levels within the organization, and you will find that the higher numbers are at the lower ends of the scale. So I would recommend gender bias. The blanket exercise, it sounds like many of you have already taken that, but that would be one for sure. And then engaging ethnocultural communities. This one is about like if you're collaborating or consulting or informing different populations, because sometimes the way that the way that non-Indigenous Canadians gather, it does not resonate with other populations. So if we send out a poster or we have something on our website or we email somebody some information about a public hearing, for example, and you're saying, well, we don't see any diversity coming, it can be the way that we're asking them to come. And so learning about working with elders in the community and establishing relationship with elders, and I'm not, including the Blackfoot community, but it can be other communities that are newcomers, immigrants to Canada as well. That you have to develop a relationship with the elder in the community, and then that person will bring the rest of them to your meetings. Addressing racism and discrimination as well. That will give you some language, some courage and language in addressing situations that you might encounter. So, all of them.
It sounds like unconscious bias is a good place to start.
Yeah,
because
unconscious bias.
It makes you check your own, and there's no reason we can't do one and then do more coming up.
Yes.
I have a question.
I thought you were done.
I'm sorry. I'm just wondering, because I think the unconscious bias one is a great place to start. Gender bias is another one. When Ms. Mackey says all of them, I'm wondering if it's appropriate for this committee to ask Ms. Mackey to go away, put some thought into maybe building a schedule of these that may be more important for council, with a timeline and time required for each of them to come back and present to council and say this would be an excellent professional development plan for council?
Well,
Yes, I can certainly do that.
let's start with the schedule and go from there. Councillor Kaufman?
To Councillor Carlson, I support that. Are you talking about for this term or setting it up for next term, build it into process for council?
Definitely, I like building it into process. Of course, it can't all happen in orientation, I wouldn't expect, but building a process for council to take these would be awesome. But if there's a few that could be incorporated into our schedule over the next 12 months, that'd be great as well.
Well, if you build 2 a year into next term, you can cover 8 and hopefully have better people on the other end, or different people on the other end, however you want to phrase that.
I agree.
All right, well, if you can give us a list and how long they take. We'll start with the unconscious bias in September and see where we go from there.
I think I just will, I think this is maybe just a reminder, but my position is a term with the city and ends January 7th of 2021 for now, just so you know. So I just want you to keep that in mind.
Okay. We have a budget deliberation between now and then, to recover. All right, well, thank you so much.
Can I just ask a question, just sort of to follow up on what Councillor Carlson was asking and maybe a little more direct? The programming is it possible to do the programming by business unit?
It's possible, but I would not recommend that. And I can explain why.
Okay.
Because what I have experienced in the past, when you have one group, like one team coming together to do the classes, you get groupthink, and there's not always a positive reaction to coming to the courses from everybody. So the other thing that I recommend is having different people coming to the courses from different business units, because they will come with different ideas and different challenges that other people can comment on and make suggestions for. So those would be the reasons I would suggest not. However, that being said, the electric utility had arranged for 3 or 4 blanket exercises for all of their staff to take the course.
Good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's not impossible to do. It's just I don't recommend that.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we have a game plan moving ahead. We'll work with the city clerk's office to set a schedule up, and we'll coordinate with you, and we'll do the first one, and then we'll see where we go from there. Thank you. All right, Ms. Jared, this survey that we had questions emailed out. It's fine.
Good afternoon, members of OEG Committee. I'm here on behalf of the Community Engagement Team to talk about engaging citizens and the satisfaction survey in regards to the 2021 and 2022 operating budget review. At the July 13th City Council meeting, this resolution was passed to delegate authority to the OEG Committee to conduct the Citizen Engagement Survey. The survey is a statistical survey that will be conducted over the telephone to 400 adult residents. Ipsos has been used for satisfaction surveys in the past, and the benefit to using them again is that there will be comparability to past surveys. After reviewing other statistically valid survey quotes, we found the costs to be similar. The attached engagement strategy outlines how the community will be engaged during the operating budget review process. There have been some changes to the estimated dates based on the work plan we have received from Ipsos in order to meet the tight timelines. The draft questions for the survey have been emailed to OEG members for review. I believe it was yesterday. If you refer to the Ipsos work plan, which is also attached, Ipsos is requesting that the questionnaire revisions by August 17th. The survey will go out to the community from August 26th to September 6th, instead of September 14th to the 28th, and the results of the survey will be provided to City Council in October. From November 2nd to the 16th, budget input will be obtained from the community using the Get Involved Lethbridge website. On November 23rd, the feedback from the online engagement will be shared with Finance Committee before budget deliberations begin. In December, the revised budget information will be communicated back to the community. So we had previously received direction and support from OEG about conducting a community satisfaction survey. The engagement team is looking for OEG's support to continue to work with Ipsos on the survey and for OEG committee to have a chance to review the draft questions for revisions by August 17th. Today, we're seeking approval from OEG on the proposed engagement strategy with a change to the dates for the survey to be August 26th to September 6th. That's all I have. I don't know if you have any questions.
Very much. I have one question first for Mr. Westerson. When you sent us the questionnaire, you sent it as basically for us only. Should we be in camera for this, or can we discuss those questions publicly?
I would recommend an in-camera discussion. It was requested to be done that way.
To go in camera then, if we want to mention anything we read in that draft survey. All right, so can we get a motion to move into in camera? Okay, Councillor Parker, all in favor?